Now we have some time for questions and answers.
Yes.
Q&A?
Yes, I have one question. In the middle of the main talk, there was an example from Colombia where there is a law that forbids including testers into the teams, right? So the testers are one thing, developers are one thing. And my question is just general. What if the law forbids you for continuous improvement, for doing agile things in your projects? Like, for example, in medical business, I'm from medical company. We have some processes, we have to follow them. If you want to change them, there's the whole process to change the process, right? And so on. And if you would like to be more agile, we have a problem that is over our head and which we don't have idea how we can change that, how we can approach problem like that.
That's a good question. First of all, the law in Colombia, what they say is that the developers and testers should not share the same environments, the same development environments. So that was the first thing that I actually did. When they say, no, it's not allowed to have developers and testers together, I was like, can I see the law? Because sometimes people are like, well, I've been told that way. It happened in Spain, for instance. For a long time, when we started doing Agile in Spain in 2005, 2006, we tried to make Agile projects with the government. And they were like, sorry, you have to use our internal methodology, which is called Metrica version 3. And that was something that the Ministry of Industry developed in the 80s. And of course, the Spanish Ministry of Industry, they are the international experts on software development and software methods. So you can imagine that the process was absolutely outrageous, was terrible. And everyone in all the government agencies were like, no, sorry, but you have to use this process because that's the law. And then one day I asked, can I see the law? And they were like, well, I don't know. Everyone told me all the time that this is the law. And I'm like, yeah, but can I see it? So we started pulling the line. And at some given moment, we finally found where the law came from. It was not a law, it was a reglamento general. It was a set of rules, let's say. So it was not that important. And when we read the set of rules said that in order to contract a software development company for a government project, this software development company had to follow a methodology. And the problem was that in the 80s, methodologies were things that the big companies like IBM were selling and certificating. And then somebody said, well, if we do this, we are being unfair because small companies won't be able to compete because they can't buy the IBM methodology or whatever. And they say, well, no problem, we will develop our methodology and we will give it away for free. And now you can all compete. So suddenly we discovered that the law was not you have to follow Metrica version 3. The law was you have to have a methodology. And we were like, oh, we can work with that. Another example is that in several government projects, they were like, oh no, but we are required by law to have a fixed set of requirements. And you cannot have like a variable scope. Because if you sign a contract for 100 features and then you work for a year, and then after that year you only deliver 85 features, and you say, okay, and you sign that you're fine with that result, that's basically against the law. That can be considered corruption. Because you are saying, okay, I will give you the contract because you are the cheaper contractor, but then I will say, just with 2 features I will be okay and I will sign the contract. So the law says, if you sign a contract for 100 features, you have to deliver the 100 features. And I was like, okay. But then I found that there was another kind of contract that was the maintenance contract. And in Spain, this is called the evolutionary maintenance contract. And I was like, what do you mean evolutionary maintenance? I mean, for me, I'm an engineer. There's 2 kinds of maintenance. It's preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance. Preventive is it's gonna break, and corrective is it broke. What's evolutionary maintenance? And I was like, oh, evolutionary maintenance is when we have a system in place, and then we have to make like small fixes, small evolutions, small things to the system. So we hire a team for a whole year, and they will do whatever we ask to the team. And I was like, that's interesting. So we started doing Agile projects where we were doing the evolutionary maintenance of systems that did not exist yet. That was an interesting loophole in the law. So usually there's a way, but then sometimes in medical companies, and I work with Linde Medical, for instance, and we were doing Agile software development in this company, there's regulation and there's things that you have to comply with. There's always a way to work with these regulations. And maybe you are not going to be as fast and agile as Amazon because you have to, every single time you have to put something into production, there's some kind of certifications and some kind of tests that you have to run, or even legal compliance. But internal processes, again, you have to find who created the processes, when were those processes created, and what was the goal of those processes. Sometimes the whole goal of the whole thing was to get a tag that says we have quality, we are certified. And then you have shitty processes for creating shitty products, but then the inspector comes and says, okay, you are following the shitty process, you are creating a shitty product, yes, this is what the process says, so now you have certified quality. And it makes no sense. And sometimes you need people to start saying, hey, how about we reconsider this whole thing? In some companies, we've managed to turn the whole ship around. In some other companies, we've had to find subterfuges. Like, for instance, doing smaller projects. In companies that say we have to follow a methodology for a project, instead of creating 2-year projects, we started doing 2-month projects. And even if that's not like super agile, you have to understand that agility is not a binary concept. When we are talking about agility, some people, and when you talk to agile gurus and all that, there's a lot of silos, like extremists in the agile community. Things are either agile or not agile, no? And everything that I'm not doing is not agile. No? It's like with alcoholism. You know the definition of an alcoholic. An alcoholic is someone that drinks more than you, okay? So everyone that is not doing what I'm doing, that's not agile. Whatever I'm doing, that's agile. No? And I don't believe that. I think that agility, and if you read the manifesto, there's one of the principles that says technical excellence enhances agility. So agility is something that can be enhanced. So okay, it can be improved, it can grow. So for me, it's like a curve towards perfection. In some given point, you have like perfect agility. You are able to deliver value instantly just by thinking on it. You will never reach that point. But if you have a company that is releasing software every 2.5 years, and then suddenly you start doing yearly releases, you are twice as agile as you were before. And then if you start doing releases every 6 months, that's 4 times more agile. And if you are able to do 1 release every quarter, then that's super agile when you are compared with the 2.5 year releases you were doing before. And then there will be always someone from the, web industry that will say, 3 months for a release. Oh, that's not agile. Try not to compare yourself with other industries. Everyone compares themselves with Spotify. You are not competing with Spotify. You are competing with other medical companies. Let me put it this way. If you and me, if we enter a room and there's a tiger in the room, I don't have to run more than the tiger. I have to run more than him. So that's my competitor, not the tiger. Okay, so in this case, Spotify is the tiger, and this will be my competitor. So if your medical company is able to make releases every 3 months instead of every 2 years, that might be pretty enough to break the industry and to be the best. And then something happens also when you are able to make smaller projects, following the process. Maybe you are like, no, if you have to follow the whole process, there's no way we can produce something in less than 3 months. And whatever we produce in 3 months is so small. It makes so little sense because it's microscopical. But that might be a very good thing, because one problem we had in the traditional industry is that we create, we work on huge projects, like migrating the core of the system, and that's like 4 or 5 years migrating the core of the system. When we're creating huge projects, the effort in order to manage these projects is also very, very hard. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of people, and then there's also a lot of mistakes, bugs. There's a lot of problems to integration. That means that the go lives are like super difficult, and people hate going live because every single time we have a production, it's like 5 million lines of code. There's going to be a lot of pain involved. And as you know that going live is painful, you tend to go live less frequently. And if you go live less frequently, you create bigger projects, and then you close a vicious cycle. On the other hand, if you are putting some small feature into production, the amount of documents that you have to write, the amount of tests that you have to run, the amount of certifications you have to do, it's less, smaller. You have less management of the project. And then also, if you have 200 lines of code that you are going to put into production and there's something wrong, okay, it's something in these 200 lines of code. It's easier to find bugs, it's easier to integrate, it's easier to find what's going on. And also when you have to put 200 lines of code into production, it's easier than when you have to put 5 million lines. So as it is easier to put things into production, you tend to start putting things into production more frequently. And as you are able to put things into production more frequently, you start doing smaller releases. And you create a very positive cycle. So one thing that you can do in a very, very regulated environment is try to figure out smaller projects. Usually the problem is that people try to figure out big projects so they can put whatever inside. No? It's like when, I don't know what you have in Poland, in Spain we have something similar to Christmas and Santa Claus, and we call it the Three Wise Men Day. And the Three Wise Men Day, kids get their Christmas presents. No? And then you ask the kids, what do you want for Christmas? And they start asking for everything. And for many people, they know that they only get one chance to get their project approved. And when they say, what do you want in your project? They are like, I want everything, because this is my opportunity to get my project approved. But if you know that every 2 months you have the opportunity to ask for something else, you can keep your list smaller, because you know that there's another Christmas every month. So now you can be like less greedy than if you have Christmas once a year. Okay? I don't know if it's giving you some ideas on how to approach this problem, and I don't know if you have experiences with your customers in highly regulated environments or highly procedimental with a lot of processes.
Okay, it's rather not about regulations, but mainly it's about trying to work with clients who are not agile yet at all. The insurance market is rather waterfall, and there are many tendencies and many people who want to work waterfall. And when we are going into the project, mostly it is easy to make the team working in Scrum way, but it is very hard to make a steering committee and to make sponsors, to make board members to thinking in Agile way. Because it is not only about the team working Agile way, but also about the management thinking in Agile way. Because without it, it is very hard to cooperate with the organization. It is easy, pretty easy to organize a team working in Scrum way. It is pretty easy to make a project working in Scrum way, but it is extremely difficult to make the cooperation between the project team and the whole organization to make working this in a Scrum way or Agile way.
Yeah, I would only add a short point on that, is that I completely agree. The most frustrating point is when not inside the project, because you usually can coach that into some kind of agility, but the intersection between this project and other projects in the client's portfolio, and when there are interdependencies between the projects inside the client's portfolio, that not all of them are software projects, some are just transformation projects. That's when the difficulty really starts. And that's where people that are not as experienced in Agile start to lose tools to cope with them.
Again, this is one of the things that we need Scrum Masters for. I remember that in one of the most successful transformations that I've been involved with, and it was not my merit. It was the merit of the company. I always say it was them. Something that happened is that some Scrum Masters started to quit because they were like, oh, the product owner is not coming to the meetings, and we don't have the tools, and we don't have Jira, and we don't have a continuous integration server, so I quit. And the company was saying, you are hired in order to fix those problems and fight for those problems. If you come to a company and the product owner is writing the backlog and you have features and into continuous integration and everything is working, then some people will start saying, what do we need Scrum Masters for? I mean, everything is fine. So yes, at the beginning, this is not about bringing a new tool. This is not like changing .NET with Java or changing Microsoft project with Jira, which is like we make the process and now we have a new tool, we get used to it. No, we are changing the whole way business works. And that's something that can be scary. Sometimes I try not to scare my customers too much, but I also have to have clear expectations. This is not something you can do on a software development team alone without changing things around the software development team. If you do so, if you just work on the software development team alone, then you will have some improvements. Like for instance, you have 5 guys that never talk to each other. They start doing daily meetings. They start sharing a board. You will have some improvements. You will have visibility on the problems. Okay, that's fine. But if you want to reach enterprise agility, not just teams doing agile methods, but having an agile company which is able to deliver value frequently, adapt to customers, create successful products, improve constantly, then you have to start changing a lot of things in the company, including the culture, including the manager's roles, you create new roles like product owners, Scrum Masters, and you change the processes. If you can't change processes, then how can you improve the company? And if you can't improve your company, well, unless you are in a very regulated, government-owned business, you're going to be in deep trouble. And even in that cases, for instance, look what happened with taxis, with cabs. They were super happy because they have like these licenses and nobody could get more licenses, and then suddenly Uber appears and everything turns upside down. Look what happened with hotels. Hotels were like, oh, we are not going to have many competitors because in order to create a new hotel, you need a lot of money and you have to build. And there's no more space in downtown Warsaw to create more hotels because there's no real estate. But then suddenly Airbnb creates a new business model and now you are in deep trouble. And the same happens with a wide variety of industries. Banking, they believed that they were safe because they had regulations and this is money and not everyone can create a bank. But then suddenly you have electronic payments, you have bitcoins, you have VeChains, you have the fintechs, the financial technological startups that are creating services that the banks are not able to supply. And now they are terrified. And now they are all like running in order to change their business. Maybe in the medical sector, they are looking to one side, they're looking to the other, and they are like, oh, we are all slow. As long as we are all slow and ineffective and inefficient, we are all fine. There's no tiger. But when one company starts being like innovative and fast and providing customers with innovation, then the others must follow, because if not, you're going to be out of business. And this is not only for software. Like for instance, we have a Spanish very successful company, Zara, Inditex. Basically, what they did is they implemented Lean in the clothing industry. One thing that happened is that, for instance, you open a Zara shop in Warsaw, and you bring, for instance, I don't know, 75,000 blue shirts, and then you put them on the store, and you find that Polish people, they don't like blue shirts, and then you have to eat those shirts for dinner, or you have to sell them below the price. But they say, what if every single time you were able to ask for shirts, we were able to deliver them in 48 hours? Then you don't need to ask for a full container of shirts. You can ask for 10 shirts. And then Warsaw store, they say, send me 10 blue shirts. Then they put it and they sell very good. And they say, send me 20. And 2 days later, they had 20 shirts. And they sold very good. And they say, send me 100. And they could adjust the batch size to the demand of that specific cloth. And basically what they did is this idea that we were discussing of having smaller deliveries and smaller orders. Instead of order clothing for the whole quarter and then having warehouses and then having to store the clothes and move them only to find that you are not able to sell them, you order every 48 hours. And the people in the store with Palm Pilots several years ago and now with iPhones, they are making the orders as they see that some clothes are selling and the other one not. So basically what they did is they reinvented the clothing business model, and people like H&M in Scandinavia, they said, we had to implement the same method or we are out of business because we cannot compete with this kind of efficiency. So sooner or later, a medical industry is going to start being like super efficient in these kind of things. You have the opportunity to be the first one. Sometimes people ask me, for instance, I was in Panama recently, and they were like, yeah, Bas, is there any bank in Panama that is doing Agile? And I'm like, you're not getting the point. You're not competing only with the banks in Panama. You're competing with all the banks in the world. And some people are like, yeah, but I'm in the concrete industry. Is anyone doing Agile in the concrete industry? And I'm like, no, not so far as I know, but you can be the first. It's an opportunity, okay? So take it. More questions? I think we still have some time.
I have a question. I have a question. Sorry, I have a question to this short feedback cycle. What about the overhead? Especially in financial industry, you often have to run full regression tests before every launch, before every go live. If you do it in smaller batches, it means you have to do full regression tests all over again more frequently. So there is a waste, some kind of, maybe not.
There's something called the single minute exchange of die, SMED, and you can read later on more about it. And this is something that Toyota developed because of this problem. Toyota decided that they wanted to work in smaller batches because that allows them to adjust to the market and to be more agile, more lean. But then they had a problem, and it was that if they printed like the frames for 100 cars, and then they stopped, and they printed the frame for 100 pickups, they had to stop the factory and they have to change the molds, the dies. And the problem here was that exchanging the dies was something like 36 hours. So they had to stop the factory, change the dies and the molds for 36 hours and then restart the factory. They produced 100 cars and then they stopped the factory 36 hours, and that was a problem. The American approach to the problem was like, okay, every single time we put a new mold, a new die for the frames, we're gonna produce 10,000 cars. So then those 36 hours that we are stopping the factory and we are creating a waste, we are going to divide that cost between 10,000 cars. So there will be a little amount of cost, a little amount of waste in each car. So it won't be noticeable. And that's the reason that they created like huge batches of production. Problem, you produce 10,000 cars and then you sold 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 and you weren't able to sell more cars because suddenly your competitor had a new car that was like faster or consumed less, and now suddenly you had 7,000 cars you couldn't sell, or you had to sell below price, and then you were not competitive enough. And the Japanese people, they said, you know what, we have to lower the time it takes to change the dies. So one day, the people in the company, they came to Taiichi Ono and Shigeo Shingo, the inventors of the Toyota production system, and they say, Sensei, we've managed to bring the time that it takes to change the molds from 36 hours to 9 hours, which is incredible. So now we can decrease the economical lot, the size of the batch. And Shigeo Shingo and Taiichi Ono, they looked to each other and they say, you have understood nothing, my dear friends. I'm not telling you to reduce the time from 36 hours to 9 hours. I want to make the change of the molds in 1 minute. And everyone was like, that's not possible. But 3 years later, they were doing it in 9 minutes. And that's what they call single minute exchange of die. And they always say that single minute meaning single digit minute. They haven't been able to change the dice in 1 minute, but they are very, very fast. And then that allows that in 9 minutes, they can switch the production to another kind of cars. What I'm trying to say is you have to invest in automation of regression tests. I have several companies that are running regression tests of the whole suite every weekend. They start the regression test on a Friday noon, and that will stop on a Monday morning. And if the regression tests are broken, then the priority is to fix the regression test. But if the regression tests are running, then we can make a small increment over the next week. And if something breaks, it's something we touched in the last 4 days. So it's very easy to find and fix. But if you put 5 million lines of code into production, then everything breaks, and everything is related to everything else. And then you have created a huge mess. So test automation is not a fancy thing that Agile people like because it's like, oh, so fun to implement. It's something we need in order to be fast enough. And it's not enough that you have, unit tests automated. You need business tests, you need interface tests. There's a lot of technology these days in order to automate the tests. And even if you cannot run a full regression of the system, sometimes you don't need a full regression of the system. Sometimes you have what we call a safety net, which is a subset of tests that we can run over the weekend, and we can say, okay, if these tests are running, we are partially safe. We are not like breaking something really, really important. And maybe we find later on that there's something wrong. My question is, when we do the full regression, does it happen that later on we found that, oops, we missed something? Or if we run regressions for 3 months or 4 months, then we are perfectly sure and never have mistakes in production. Even banks, they have production mistakes, and they are fixing these mistakes live because they don't have time to go for the full process. Once you have the software live and you find there's a bug, then suddenly it's super fast to fix a bug. But when you have something in staging and there's a bug, whoa, there's a process for that. No?
Okay, Angel, so you mentioned Joshua Kirievsky, and he basically says that Scrum is like a car from 60s or 70s that will take you to a place, okay, but it won't do it the efficient way that modern cars do. How would you respond to that?
I mean, I know Joshua himself, and the first time we met, I was like, we didn't have a good start, but yeah, it was interesting. I was like, because he was bashing Scrum a lot, and I was like, dude. And we were in Prague in a conference, and is this being recorded, by the way? And then at the end of the conference, I was staying for one more day, and in the morning I went for breakfast, and who's having breakfast there? Joshua Kirievsky, and I was like, oh crap. And it was unpolite to say I'm going to sit on a table, and I was like, okay, let's sit together. So we started talking, and I was like, when are you leaving? And he was like, no, I'm leaving this afternoon. And oh, me too. What are you planning to do this morning? No, I was going to have a walk downtown Prague. Me too. And I'm like, crap, now I'm stuck with this guy. Fuck it. Okay, I guess we can go together. And then we had a walk, and we are best friends ever since. I managed to realize that he's an amazing human being, and we had so many things in common. And one thing that happens, that I wanted to state this because if I want to criticize something about someone, I want you to understand that sometimes we are friends and we have different perspectives. Someone that is always also bashing Scrum and frameworks these days is Jürgen Appelo. Mike Biddle is also bashing a lot of other frameworks. It's like the fashionable thing to do these days. And you know what? All these guys that are saying that Scrum sucks and Scrum won't take you anywhere, they have been doing Scrum for 15 years. So have they wasted 15 years of their time? I don't think so. I think that what the problem we have here is the sensei problem. And the beginner, the kohai, doesn't have to do what the sensei is doing or what the senpai is doing. When you start doing martial arts, what you do is kata. Kata, it's a predefined set of movements like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. No? Ich, ni, sang, ji, go, rok. And if you are an experienced mixed martial arts fighter, and you see that, you are like, that's nonsense. If I go into the hexagon and I say, hey, they're going to kill me. That's not real fighting. That's not going to take you anywhere. But maybe this experienced fighter is forgetting that when he started training martial arts, he did kata. If you see small kids doing calligraphy, you could say, that's not going to take you through college. You'll have to learn real note-taking and how to do schemes and the notes and all that. But everyone starts with calligraphy. And for me, Scrum is kata. It's calligraphy. It's a way to start with a process that is very well defined, it's very well documented, it's been done several times with success, and then you can start there, and the problem is you shouldn't stop there. The same thing happens with SAFe. I'm one of the people I was against SAFe when I saw the infamous infography. I was like, what? What's that? Boo, that's not Agile. But then, things of life, I ended up being a SAFe trainer. And these days, I'm like, of course, this is not the end state. But when you come to a big corporation, Scrum is not enough in the sense that the Scrum is not going to solve things like budget allocation, or what do we do with the business stakeholders, or how do we synchronize several teams together when there are several systems that are implied in one release. And then SAFe gives you some tools for that. But of course, people that have been doing agility for a long time, they don't need SAFe anymore because they have interiorized the way they collaborate together, and they say, just let people talk to each other. But if you come to a bank that has never been doing agility and you say, oh, this is so simple, just let people talk to each other, you are like, yeah, they've been doing that for 50 years. They have been killing each other for 50 years. So we have to try something else. And Scrum, SAFe, they give you a framework, a frame, kata, like some predefined movements that you can start practicing until you start extending that into your own flavor. Alistair Coburn brought into the Agile literature the martial arts concept of shuhari. And the shuhari says that in order to become a martial artist, you have to travel through the shu, the ha, and the ri. And the shu is follow the rule, and that would be Scrum, follow the process. And then the ha is let's start expanding the rule. Maybe I bring things from other martial arts. Maybe I realize that this, I don't know, Jet Kundo position that is very lateral is not good for me. Or maybe if I'm a Thai boxing fighter and I have this position, I realize that I'm very thick and very wide and I'm giving like a perfect target to my opponent. So I prefer to go like a little bit sideways, so I'm like smaller. I start using things that are good for me in my particular context because now I know. But at the beginning, you cannot decide, no, I'm not going to use this guard. I'm going to use this guard because I like it better. And you're like, that's stupid. No, but I like it. Because at the beginning, you don't have the knowledge to decide what's a good guard. In the future, once you've tried several predefined guards, and you've tried Thai boxing, and you've tried Aikido, and you've tried Jet Kundo, then you can see, okay, which is the one that works better for me? And then you extend the rule. And at some given moment, you dissolve the rule. When you see the masters, they enter a fight, and they are walking like they're going for shopping for groceries. And then someone attacks them, and you don't see it, and the other guy is dead. And you're like, what did you do? And they're like, I don't know. And you try to do that, but you are not prepared. Okay, so you need an evolution. And for me, some people like Joshua and Jürgen, they are trying to say, let's jump the whole from beginner to expert without all the intermediate points. And I don't believe that's possible. If you want to climb a mountain, of course, you have people on top of the mountain saying, the view here is amazing, and you can jump and paraglide. And you are in the base of the mountain, and you're trying to jump with your parachute, and you're like, I cannot fly. And you're like, yes, because those people are speaking from the top of the mountain and you are in the base of the mountain. You have to go to base camp number 1 and then base camp number 2. And one day you will arrive at the top of the mountain and then you can forget about all the things you were doing at the beginning. Okay, thank you.
So I liked very much this differentiation between a Scrum Master long point of view and the product owner short perspective. But in the end, how do you find the balance between these two?
I mean, the way Scrum has proposed to find a balance between the short term and the long term is dividing these two roles in two different people. Because we have the project manager traditionally, and if you read the project management body of knowledge and the PMI, they talk about the motivation of the team and developing the people, but at the end of the day, when you saw project managers, very few project managers were dedicating significant amount of time to motivation, collaboration, quality, and things like that, because they were so concerned about delivery. And what Scrum did is they divided this project manager in two, and they said, let's have someone very concerned with delivery, and then let's have another person that is more concerned with continuous improvement and all that. And at the end of the day, this balance depends on the dynamics between the Scrum Master and product owner. If the product owner is very powerful and the Scrum Master is like only a nominal thing that we put to some person, there will be no balance. On the other hand, in some companies, the balance is the other way around. Very technical companies where a Scrum Master will say, for the next 6 months, we are going to ship nothing because we are going to be learning new frameworks and refactoring the legacy code base. And everyone is like, oh, they are self-organizing, so we can say nothing. And they get the company bankrupt because they produce nothing. So in order to have a balance, a healthy dynamic between the product owner and the Scrum Master, for me, it's crucial. I don't know if you have any experiences with this, trying to have a balance between Scrum Master, product owner.
I can try this. Well, I think it also depends on the type of the company that you are. So, for example, with our company, we I feel that at the early stages of agility, we got that kind of mixed up. But that was the product owner, the consultant, the Scrum Master role. But that was also because for a long time we were a relatively small consulting company. So we had like the culture of improvement. So for example, I would get rid of my best developer from my team because I knew that there's somewhere there is a strategic project that needs a new team of experienced people. So I wanted to provide that. But I feel like with the scaling of the company, the separation between the physical separation between the product owner and the Scrum Master might be more needed, because if you cannot ensure that everyone lives in that culture of always self-improving, then like Angel said, the instincts take better of us. So you cannot feasibly demand of someone not to work in his own best interest. So that's my take on it.
There's also, as we pass the mic, something very fast. This is something beyond agility or Scrum. I mean, the short-term, long-term is something that there's a lot of management literature talking about this problem. There's a book that, it's a controversial book. Some people hate it, some people love it. When I read it several years ago, I loved it. And it's about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And he mentions this idea that there's things that are urgent, and then there are things that are not urgent, and then there are things that are important, and things that are not important. And then he says, well, if something is not important, not urgent, that's something that we shouldn't be paying attention to. This is a waste of time. Maybe we are procrastinating. If there's something urgent but it's not important, like a phone that is ringing, you have to take that phone call, but it's maybe not an important phone call, maybe you should delegate that. This is reduce or get rid of. And then you have the urgent and important things. And usually for most companies, most of the time they spend their whole life here. This is fires. Okay, basically what you have here is a lot of fires. And a lot of companies, they believe that they are firefighters. And you know, if you're a medical company or if you are a hospital, probably there's a lot of fires going on all of the time. But if you're a software development company and all of the time you have 60 fires every week, then probably there's someone in the company that is, how do you say that in English? It's a pyromaniac. You have to find that person and cut his hands, and then everyone will be happier. So, and then Stephen Covey says, he numbers the quadrants. He says quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4, and he says if you close your eyes and you think about something that will dramatically improve the quality of the company, the success of the company, something that will bring a new state of performance, mostly 100% of the time is something that you will find on quadrant 2. Kaizen, continuous improvement. Why? Because if it's something super urgent, it's already been done. We haven't been doing this amazing thing that will improve our company a lot because it's not urgent, and there's always something more urgent to be doing. And I think this is an exercise we should do every once in a while, and for instance, retrospectives is a good way to try to have this kind of reflections on things we should be doing on the long run in order to have better companies. And then also companies should decide how much time do I want to invest in innovation, research, learning, removing impediments, research, development, innovation, learning, experimentation. For instance, something I ask in my customers is, can you please give me 5% of the time for laboratories? That means one afternoon every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we dedicate 4 hours of the team to research, development, innovation, learning, experimentation, and there's a lot of things we do there. Even implementing new tools or fixing problems. That's 4 hours every 2 weeks, but then the results accumulate over time, and then you have better performing teams on the future. And usually the velocity is not reduced, the motivation goes up, and then the results go slowly better and better and better over time because you have more prepared and more skilled people. And then, thank you.
You were referring to the balance in the long and short term between the Scrum Master and the product owner. But what I would like to express is that there is also a different balance connected with the team maturity. Because when it comes to the product owner spends with the team similar amount of time with the starting team, with the experienced team. When it comes to the Shuhari level, it doesn't matter in which stage of this level the team is, the product owner needs to spend with the team the same amount of time. But when it comes to the Scrum Master, it is a bit different. Because in the first level, in the level Shu, the Scrum Master is a teacher, and the Scrum Master teaches the team. And it is 100% job for the Scrum Master. And so from our experience, at the beginning, the role of the Scrum Master is a bit more important than the role of product owner, because the people don't know how to work. The people don't know how to get value from the product owner. The people don't know how to deliver the value which product owner want them to deliver. When the team becomes and move to the high level, the Scrum Master becomes a bit like a mentor for the team. And on this level, the Scrum Master spends a bit less time with the team, and the team starts to realize how important is the product owner. And on the raw level, on the last level, the Scrum Master is the coach for the team. So from our experience, the balance between the Scrum Master and product owners is also dependent on the maturity of the team. The less experienced is the team, the more important is the Scrum Master role. The more experienced is the team, the more important is the product owner role.
I agree partially. I think that this teacher, mentor, coach, evolution, I absolutely agree. But I also think that I've seen that if you have a good product owner, for instance, if you are starting a Scrum pilot or an Agile transformation and there's a good product owner, that alone can make a team successful with no Scrum Masters. If you have a good product owner at the beginning, that alone can be a good condition. It's not necessary because you can have a bad product owner and then Scrum Master can coach that person and on the long run. But if you start with a good product owner, I'm a product owner, I would say, okay, we're going to be Agile and it's my decision and I take the reins of this project and it's going to be an Agile project because I manage the backlog. And I decide to do iterative incremental development, and I split the product and I slice the product in small increments, and I say this is the one thing that you're going to be doing, and I don't want you to be working on nothing else, and I will produce the increments. So in the short term, having a product owner is like super successful for the team. On the long term, you will need also the Scrum Master in order to start working on things like, okay, now we are delivering features every 2 weeks, fantastic. But that's not the final goal. We need high-performing teams, we need continuous improvement, we need better products, and in the long run, the Scrum Master will have this responsibility. But if you want like fast results from a team, which is not necessarily the goal, but sometimes you have to demonstrate to the company that this thing is working, I will definitely put my bets on a good product owner for that team, because that's critical.
The question is also whether this good product owner is working only as a product owner, or he is taking care some duties of the Scrum Master.
Maybe. At the beginning, you know, the company in the first, my experience, just my experience, the company on the first stages of a transformation, they don't want to see, their biggest concern is not motivation, learning, removing impediments. They want to see delivery. And delivery is part of the product owner's responsibility. So sometimes the problem is that we bring a good Scrum Master, the Scrum Master starts coaching the team, teaching them things, but then the team is not allowed to practice those teams and they are like super pressured for delivery, and we try to bring the product owner is not there, even though the Scrum Master is trying and there's no backlog and there's no priorities. And even though the Scrum Master might be doing a good job that we will see next year, in the first month, 2 months, 3 months, there's no tangible delivery because the product owner is not performing well, even though maybe the Scrum Master is trying to coach that person. So that's the reason that having, when I try to configure the pilot teams, usually a very clear pattern is that if we spot a good product owner and that person starts working with the team right at the beginning, usually that increases the chances that we're going to be successful dramatically. Whereas if the Scrum Master is not a good Scrum Master, we might change that in the mid-time, in the long run, but in the very first sprints, having a product owner, I mean, even if he has the skills and he's open to be coached, that's enough. But you need someone that's going to perform the role. If you have someone that will reject performing the role of the product owner and is not going to be available, then we have deep troubles in order to make that team successful in the short term. In the long term, of course, everything is possible.
That's probably why our Scrum Masters are doing partially a product owner's job on our projects.
It's one of the approaches I see a lot. Oh, the product owner is not doing the product owner. I will do the product owner. I will write the user stories. I will create the backlog. Okay, that's what I call a Scrum mom. It's like, don't worry, kids, I will do dinner. Don't worry, kids, I will wash the clothes. Don't worry, kids, I will do your homework. And at some given moment, you are like, no, you have to take responsibility for that. But yes, I see it a lot. And sometimes it's a needed stage. Sometimes you need that.
So to put more ashes in the fire on that topic, does the Scrum Master really need to coach the product owner, or is the only one that is responsible for it? Because most oftenly that's what I see in projects, that all the responsibility relies on the Scrum Master. Whereas I think that his entire organization
that is responsible for it. But at a certain point, you are telling that, yes, the Scrum Master takes that role. Which should be the boundaries and that we should never cross? Because that's what I would like to know that from your experience.
What do you think? You want to answer?
I
first?
think that I don't have the microphone.
Oh. I mean, a rule that I try to teach people when we start doing Scrum is everything is everyone's responsibility. If there's no backlog, that's everyone's responsibility. If there's no retrospective, that's everyone's responsibility. If there's no improvement backlog, like impediment backlog, like we haven't been able to identify impediments, that's everyone's responsibilities. But when something is not happening, there's a first person I will ask to. For instance, there's no impediments identified. That's everyone's responsibility, but the first person I'm going to ask about the problem is the Scrum Master. Hey, Scrum Master, why your team is not working on spotting impediments and removing impediments? If there's no backlog, that's everyone's responsibility, but the first person I will question is the product owner. Hey, product owner, why there's no backlog? You are the keeper of the backlog. And then when the product owner is not doing the backlog or the team is not able to do estimates, I will question the product owner, I will question the team, but then I will talk to the Scrum Master every single time. Sometimes it's a little bit unfair because anything that's not working, Scrum Master has to take some kind of responsibility. But if your responsibility is, I'll do it, then you are still on the Scrum Mom phase. Tests are not being automated. Whose responsibility is that? It's the team's responsibility. But then I go to the Scrum Master and say, hey, your team is not automating the tests. And if the Scrum Master says, okay, I will automate the tests, I will say, okay, but on the long run, that's not the solution. You have to coach these people into being responsible. So at the beginning, yes, you can say, I will write the user stories. Okay, that's your call. Maybe on the short term, that's a solution. On the long run, you have to coach the product owner and the team so they work together in creating useful, meaningful user stories. So the problem is that when Scrum Masters find themselves in the Scrum Mom role, saying I will do the cooking and I will do the washing and I will do the homework and I will do everything, they find themselves useful. I automate the tests, I write the reports, I write the user stories, and then suddenly you are feeling your 8 hours of work and you are like, I'm justifying that Scrum Masters are valuable. But that's not your job. I mean, in a given moment, the kids have to start being grown up and adults, and they have to own their own responsibility. And that's where you start being a mentor and a coach instead of a teacher or instead of a mom.
And I guess this is the trap in which we are falling many times with this short-term approach. Because, for example, when we are doing implementation project in 6 months, this is the short time for the team lifetime, right? So we are constantly changing this and doing such things like Scrum Mom or taking Scrum Master, taking some responsibilities for product owner, because this ensures that we will deliver in 6 months.
Well, in those terms, I'm a big proponent of vocalization of the problems. So I don't believe that there are necessarily bad ways to work as long as they are efficient. And as Krzysiek said, the problem can often occur when you don't have enough time to improve within that project. Or, for example, you get a product owner who doesn't want to be a product owner and he doesn't want to learn how to do it. I believe that just if you find someone else who can do it, but you vocalize that this is your, and of course, if you cannot change that person. If you vocalize that this is your responsibility to do it, but this guy will help you to do it, he'll do it instead of you, and he'll explain to you why he's doing it that way, and you will accept it because it's your responsibility, which someone else is providing at the moment. I believe that you give yourself a chance to improve in the long term. And in the projects that we are doing, which are like, they are usually half a year projects, you have to look at the improvement more long term. You have to think about the next project being better. You have to think about the people from the project going on another project and being better. And you have to think about this product owner or this guy from the client side doing other things within his company. And hell, one of the most satisfying things is finding a guy who never thought about software development, being assigned a product owner after the project, being crap at the product owner role, being a glorified subject matter expert / tester, but after the project telling you, hey, I want to develop in that role, I liked what you were doing instead of me, and I think I understand how you did it, and I would like to develop, and I asked around in my company, and I have some development opportunities. So yeah, that's basically it.